When I was a kid, my dad had bought this Sony handheld camcorder to videotape our lives as a family. He would videotape vacations, music recitals, holidays, birthdays, pretty much anything. When my dad wasn't using the camera, my friends and I would use it to record ourselves doing, well, whatever it is that teenagers do. Some videos were only a few minutes long. Some went on for a while. I had nearly forgotten them until finding the camcorder sitting in a box in the back of a closet. It's a strange feeling to be watching historical evidence of your life while, at the same time, having no real recollection of the events ever taking place. Sure, I remember going on walks with my friends all the time, but I don't remember this specific walk on this specific day. The same can be said for almost every videotape I came across. I had a general sense of going on vacation there or being in a concert at some point, but I had no memory of the details. As I continued watching the tapes one by one, I felt as though I was rediscovering a past that I had long forgotten. It felt as though my memories of the past had been written over by more recent ones. After all, I remember college much better than I remember being a teenager. I wondered to myself if this is how memory must really work. If so, how can I really be sure of who I am? If my memories of who I was are slowly being replaced by more recent memories, then how can I be certain of my past? Furthermore, how can I be certain of who I am today if I have no certainty about who I was? After all, it's our past that, by and large, defines who we are today, isn't it? Suddenly, I realized I had become the ship of Theseus. According to the ancient historian Plutarch, Theseus was a man of great bravery, intelligence, and virtue. Not only was Theseus known for his countless tales of heroic deeds and treacherous quests, but he was also known for unifying the region of Attica and establishing Athens as the political and cultural center of Greece. In one such adventurous tale, Theseus travels to an island off the coast of Athens. There, he single-handedly defeats a minotaur that had been terrorizing passing merchant ships. Upon his return, the townspeople were so joyous to hear of his victory that they immortalized the event by preserving his ship in the harbor of Athens. As time passed by, the anchored ship began to show its age. Every time a piece of the ship was broken or badly aged, it was immediately replaced, thus restoring the ship. Piece by piece, board by board, the ship of Theseus lived on. After a century of being anchored in the dock of Athens, every piece of the ship of Theseus had been replaced or restored. Rather than reminiscing about the long-ago exploits of the adventurous hero, Plutarch asks us to consider if the ship once sailed by Theseus was still the ship of Theseus. After all, if every piece of the ship had been replaced, can we really say that this is the ship upon which he sailed to defeat the Minotaur? And so the vessel posed a challenging question. As Plutarch puts it, the vessel became a standing illustration for the philosophers in the proposed question of growth, some declaring that it remained the same, others that it was not the same vessel. The ship of Theseus has been a debated conversation among philosophers for centuries. It's often categorized under the topic of personhood or personal continuity. It's a field of philosophy which often asks questions such as, how do I know that I am the same today as I was yesterday? Or how can I know that a thing continues to exist as it was despite the nature of change? I wondered if my memories were just like the wooden planks on that ship. If my memories are constantly being replaced by new and more relevant ones, then how can I be sure of who I even was? If who I am today is a product of who I was, and I don't know or can't trust that I know who I was, then how can I be sure of who I am today? And the rabbit trail of questions doesn't stop there. What if nostalgia is the process of saying goodbye to old memories that will soon be replaced by new ones? Maybe that's why we experience nostalgia in the midst of major life changes. I've heard it said that history is doomed to repeat itself. What if all of human history is like the ship of Theseus, and our collective memories of who we were and what we did are constantly being replaced by new ones, dooming us to repeat the same mistakes of our past after having long forgotten them? These questions, left unanswered, made me feel restless, like a puzzle that's incomplete, a table that's not quite steady, or a song that's left unfinished. Every idea or proposed solution to the problems and questions of personhood fundamentally depend on two schools of thought, which can be placed on a spectrum. Those who see the self as something immaterial on one end, and those who see the self as something only material on the other. Let's consider for a moment one of the many strictly material perspectives. David Hume's bundle theory claims that the self is not a single, unified substance, but rather a collection or a bundle of perceptions, thoughts, feelings, and sensation. There is no enduring self beyond the bundle. This applies to objects, too. The color, size, smell, and even shape of an object are all properties and attributes that, when bundled, create that specific object. Imagine, if you will, a stuffed teddy bear. And you've had this teddy bear since you were a kid. In fact, it was one of your closest companions growing up. Now, however, it's merely a relic of your past. Imagine a friend buys you the same exact teddy bear. Same company, same model, same look. Side by side, you would, of course, know immediately that the teddy bear you received from your friend is not the teddy bear you truly cherished as a kid, even though they are identical in appearance. Why would you know that this isn't your teddy bear? Because although they are identical in every way, the new teddy bear isn't the same object or bundle as your teddy bear. It's not made with the same materials, colors, and textures as yours. Same bear, different material. David Hume's bundle theory provides one possible answer to our dilemma about the ship of Theseus. The ship we see today is certainly not literally the ship of Theseus, but we treat it as if it is, due to the way that our minds work. In a treatise on human nature, Hume contends that identity over time, whether of objects or persons, is not something we find in the world itself, but something projected by the imagination. As the ship's parts are replaced one by one, there is no underlying substance or essence that persists. Instead, what we experience is a series of related qualities, such as shape, function, and continuity of location. And our minds smooth over these changes to form the illusion of sameness. Regardless of appearance, the ship that sits in the harbor of Athens is not the same ship used by Theseus all those years ago. Same ship, different materials. At face value, bundle theory makes sense, especially when it comes to things like teddy bears. However, despite how useful it might be, it doesn't quite satisfy every question about personhood we might have. Bundle theory certainly does have its objections. For example, what is it that bundles everything together? If the self is just a bundle of experiences, what unifies those experiences into a single consciousness? Why don't perceptions just float independently? There must be something like a subject or container that holds everything together. As Thomas Reid, a critic of Hume, puts it, a bundle requires a string. How about moral responsibility or accountability? If I'm simply a collection of various properties and attributes at any given moment, then I must not have been the same person 10 years ago as I am today, since that person from 10 years ago would be made of different memories and experiences. Even the cells in our bodies are completely different today from the cells in our bodies 10 years ago. If there really is no enduring self, how can I be held responsible today for my actions 10 years ago? Bundle theory, and material perspectives for that matter, fall short of not only a rationally sufficient explanation to the question of personhood, but they also fall short of an explanation that feels sufficient. Even if we concede that a material perspective has much to offer, and it really does, it doesn't feel like the whole picture when it comes to finding the best solution to personhood. It leaves just as many questions as it sought to answer. And to be fair, the same can be said of purely metaphysical explanations too. For example, if what makes me a person is only metaphysical, then how do we explain change over time? Also, how do we explain physical, emotional, or mental states if there is no material framework from which we can begin to describe them? Just as the case with a strictly material explanation, the list of objections against a purely metaphysical explanation goes on. So what if, rather than being either or, what if the answer is both? The story of creation that the Bible paints for us actually deals directly with this question of personal continuity. Genesis chapters 1 and 2 tell the story of how God created the universe, the world, and everything in it. What's particularly interesting is Genesis 2:7, where it says this: "Then the Lord God formed the man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living creature." Notice, if you will, that three things are occurring in this passage: dust of the ground, breath of life, and living creature. The first two are ingredients, and the last one is the product. In other words, dust plus breath equals creature. Dust is perhaps the easiest ingredient to define. The word means dust, ashes, earth, ground, powder. It's the physical substance of man, the material thing of which he is made. Every human which has ever existed has been made of the dust of the ground. Simply put, this is our body. Breath is a beautiful term. The word means a puff, wind, divine inspiration, or spirit. This is that non-physical part of us which was given to us. It's the part of us that makes us alive. It gives life to the pile of dust that God had formed. In the book of Job, chapter 33, we see Elihu using the same exact word that is used here in Genesis. "The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life." Notice that from these two words we have the ingredients of a human. We know that we need a material substance like dust or earth, and we need an immaterial substance like spirit. Now the word creature is somewhat of an unfortunate translation because the word means life, self, heart, living being, or soul. Where the dust of the ground meets the breath of life, man becomes a living soul. I first came across this description in the book The Spiritual Man by an early 20th century Chinese pastor and teacher named Watchman Nee. He puts it this way: "The soul is the meeting point. Here, the spirit and the body join. Man communicates with God's spirit, and the spiritual realm communicates through the spirit and receives and expresses power and life in the spiritual realm through its spirit. He communicates with the outside world of senses through the body. The world and the body interact with one another. The soul lies in between these two worlds and belongs to these two worlds." So why is this so important? Because Genesis shows us that the question of personhood isn't a dilemma of having to choose between a material or an immaterial explanation. You see, the soul, or the very essence of what a person is, isn't just the dust of the ground, and it isn't just the breath of life. Rather, it's both. Take away either the material or the immaterial, and you're left with only half of the puzzle. Change is a material property. All of life in our physical world is subject to change. Yet, rather than being a challenge to the idea of continuity, Genesis reveals to us that it is a part of what it means to be human and to wrestle with the idea of continuity in the first place. Change is a part of what it means to be made of the dust of the ground. The material parts of our soul, like change, are easy to understand because we live in the physical and material world every day. It's the immaterial part of our soul that we have a harder time grasping. Perhaps this is why it's called the breath of life, because it's something difficult to catch. And yet, this part of our soul is the most important part. It's the part of us that glues us together and animates our body. It gives us life. It's the very breath of God. And maybe that's the point. We spend so much time trying to piece together who we are by looking backwards through old tapes, fading memories, or philosophical thought experiments. We ask, who was I, or am I still the same person? But perhaps the better question is, whose am I? Because if I am only dust and memory, then I am fragile, always changing, always slipping through the cracks of time. But if I am, as Genesis tells me, both dust and breath, if I am a soul made by God, formed intentionally, animated by His Spirit, then my identity is not something I need to chase down in the past or fear losing in the future. My identity is held together not by perfect memory, but by perfect love. In Psalm 139, David writes, "You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." That means even when I forget who I was, God never does. Even when I lose track of the moments that shaped me, He remembers them perfectly. And more than that, He holds them in His hands. So yes, like the ship of Theseus, parts of us will change. We will grow, evolve, forget, rebuild. But we are not just bundles of moments. We are not just memories stacked like videotapes in a closet. We are souls. Souls with a story that begins not with us, but with the one who breathed life into the dust.